In the heart of Madrid, where golden sunlight kissed the red rooftops, stood a grand mansion of polished marble and carved oak doors. Inside lived Adrian Velasquez, a self-made millionaire known for his strict discipline and cold demeanor. He had built empires, but within the walls of his home, silence reigned heavier than anywhere else. His only daughter, Isla, a 3-year-old with hair like spun gold, had never spoken a word since birth. Doctors called it a mystery. Her voice was trapped, locked behind her innocent smile. Adrian poured fortunes into therapies, specialists, and clinics, but hope was fading. One autumn morning, as Adrian left for work, a new face arrived at the mansion. She was Elena Duarte, a young woman with kind eyes and a quiet grace, dressed in a simple black and white maid's uniform. Though hired as a cleaning lady, there was something in her gentle aura that seemed to brighten even the gloomiest halls. She noticed little Isla sitting alone in the courtyard, hands folded on her lap, staring at the falling leaves. Elena knelt beside her, not saying a word. Instead, she clapped softly, a rhythm like a secret song, smiling as if she understood Isla's silence. The little girl's eyes widened. No one had ever spoken to her in that language before, the language of unspoken warmth. Slowly, Isla's tiny hands mimicked the clap, and for the first time, her laughter echoed, light and fragile as glass. From the doorway, Adrian paused, his briefcase heavy in his hand. He froze, watching the stranger reach his daughter in a way doctors and tutors never could. His throat tightened, though he would never admit it. To see Isla laugh, and not just laugh but glow, made something stir inside him, something he had buried for years. He whispered under his breath, almost in disbelief, "I can't believe this." Adrian spent the rest of the day with his mind clouded. Numbers on contracts blurred, phone calls slipped past his attention. His thoughts kept circling back to that simple scene, his daughter laughing in the arms of a maid. For years, Isla had been a puzzle too complex for science, too delicate for pressure. And yet Elena, with nothing but patience in her hands and kindness in her smile, had unlocked a part of Isla that even millions of dollars could not reach. That evening, when Adrian returned home, the mansion felt different. It was no longer silent marble and echoing halls. It was alive. From the courtyard came soft clapping sounds, followed by squeals of delight. Adrian followed the sound and saw Elena sitting cross-legged on the ground, while Isla sat opposite her in a bright red dress, mimicking her every move. Elena wasn't speaking, yet every gesture carried meaning. She tapped her hands on the tiles, then touched her lips, as though inviting Isla to respond. The little girl tilted her head, hesitant at first, and then, almost like a whisper carried on the wind, she shaped her lips to release a faint sound. It wasn't a word, not even close, but it was the first sound Isla had ever made in her father's presence. Adrian's chest tightened. He gripped the door frame to steady himself. His entire empire, the millions in his accounts, the endless boardroom victories, none of it mattered in that moment. For the first time in years, tears burned behind his eyes. But Adrian Velasquez was a man of stone, a man who never cried. So he did what he always did. He hid in the shadows, silent, letting the moment carve its place in his heart. From the courtyard, Elena glanced up briefly, as if sensing he was there. She didn't speak, didn't break the fragile magic that had been born. Instead, she smiled faintly, as though telling him without words, "Don't fear. She is learning to speak in her own way." The following days unfolded like a miracle Adrian could barely comprehend. Every morning before leaving for his offices, he found himself lingering near the courtyard, watching from the shadows as Elena worked with Isla. She never forced the child, never pressed her to speak. Instead, she played clapping games, soft humming, even silly dances that made the little girl giggle until her cheeks glowed pink. One afternoon, as golden light spilled across the tiles, Elena brought a small wooden toy bird from her bag. She wound a little key on its side, and the bird chirped a faint tune before flapping its wings. Isla's eyes widened with wonder, her tiny hands reaching out as if the bird were alive. Elena whispered gently, "Pájaro," the Spanish word for bird. Isla pressed her lips together. First nothing came. But then, to Elena's quiet encouragement, a faint sound escaped. Pa, barely audible, fragile like a candle in the wind. Elena gasped softly, her eyes shining with tears. Yes, Isla, Pájaro. Behind them, Adrian had come home early. He had entered silently, meaning to retreat upstairs, but froze when he heard the sound. The syllable, rough, incomplete, but real, hit him harder than any business deal, harder than any loss he had ever endured. His daughter, his silent little angel, had whispered her first sound. His hand trembled on the banister. His throat ached with unshed tears. No boardroom in the world could prepare him for the ache of that fragile whisper. He wanted to rush forward, to hold his daughter, to thank the woman who had unlocked this miracle. But something in him stopped. Years of being hardened, of hiding emotions, kept him still. So he did what he always did. He stepped back, retreating into the shadows. Alone, he covered his face with one hand, and for the first time in decades, Adrian Velasquez allowed a tear to fall. In the courtyard, Isla clapped with joy, unaware of the storm she had just stirred inside her father's heart. That night, the mansion was quiet, but not with the emptiness Adrian had grown used to. It was the quiet of peace, the kind that follows a miracle. Isla had fallen asleep clutching the little wooden bird in her small hands, her lips still parted as if practicing that one precious syllable. Adrian stood outside her room, watching her from the doorway. He hadn't moved for minutes, afraid that if he blinked, the magic would dissolve. For the first time in his life, his wealth, his empire, his reputation, none of it held meaning. Only the soft breaths of a child who had just whispered her first sound. When he finally stepped back, he found Elena waiting in the corridor, her hands folded politely in front of her apron. She lowered her eyes, as though apologizing for witnessing too much of his private life. "You've done something no one else could," Adrian said, his voice low, careful. Elena shook her head softly. "No, senor, I didn't do it." Isla already had it inside her. She only needed someone to listen to her silence. Her words struck him deeper than he expected. For years, Adrian had treated silence as an enemy, proof of failure, of something broken. But Elena, she saw it as language, as strength waiting to be found. "Why?" Adrian asked suddenly. His voice cracked, betraying the control he guarded so fiercely. "Why are you helping her this way? You were hired to clean floors, not this." Elena hesitated, then met his eyes with a softness that startled him. "Because I know what it means to have no voice. I was once a child who nobody listened to, and I promised myself, if I ever saw another soul trapped in silence, I would never turn away." For a long moment, Adrian said nothing. His jaw tightened, his hand flexed at his side. 1,000 boardroom negotiations had never made him this vulnerable. And yet, standing before this maid, this ordinary woman with extraordinary patience, he felt a weight lift from his chest. "Gracias," he whispered at last, his voice breaking, "for giving me back something I thought I had lost forever." Elena smiled faintly. "It is not lost, senor. It is just beginning." Adrian turned away quickly before she could see the tears threatening to fall again. Days turned into weeks, and the rhythm of the mansion had changed. No longer was it a palace of stone-cold silence. It now carried the soft music of claps, giggles, and the hesitant sounds of a child learning to find her voice. Adrian, once a ghost in his own home, now found excuses to come back earlier, to linger near the courtyard, to watch the miracle unfold again and again. One evening, a storm rolled across Madrid. Rain lashed against the tall windows, and thunder shook the sky. Isla, frightened by the sudden noise, clung tightly to Elena's arm. Her little body trembled. Her lips quivered as if something inside her wanted to break free. Elena held her gently, whispering softly, "No tengas miedo. It's only the sky speaking." She guided Isla's small hand to her chest. "Do you feel this? It is your heart, stronger than the storm. You can tell it so." Isla's eyes glistened with fear and determination. She pressed her lips together, then released the smallest whisper, "Pa, pa." The sound sliced through the storm like lightning. Elena gasped, covering her mouth in shock. Isla had not just whispered a random syllable this time. She had shaped a word. "Papa." From the doorway, Adrian stood frozen, his world collapsing and rebuilding in an instant. His daughter's first true word wasn't from the endless doctors, nor from the expensive therapies. It was spoken here, in the arms of a maid, in the middle of a storm. "Papa?" Isla cried again, reaching out toward him with trembling hands. Adrian's briefcase slipped from his fingers, crashing onto the marble floor. He rushed forward, his carefully built walls shattering. He fell to his knees, pulling Isla into his arms. She buried her face into his chest, whispering the word again and again, as if afraid it would vanish. "Papa, Papa." The millionaire who had spent years hiding his tears could no longer stop them. They streamed freely, hot against his cheeks, soaking into his daughter's golden hair. He held her tighter than he had ever held anything in his life, his voice breaking into sobs. Elena stepped back quietly, her heart swelling at the sight. She had given them a gift that no fortune could buy, the bond of a father and his daughter reborn through a single word. For the first time in years, Adrian Velasquez was not a man of wealth nor power. He was simply a father. And finally he was seen. The storm passed, leaving the air fresh with the scent of rain and earth. In the mansion, silence no longer felt heavy. It was tender, filled with meaning. Isla slept peacefully in her father's arms that night, her tiny lips still curling around the word that had broken years of silence. "Papa." Adrian sat beside her bed long after she drifted off, his hand brushing through her golden hair. For the first time, he felt powerless in the most beautiful way. All the empires he had built, all the fortunes he had stacked, seemed insignificant compared to this one fragile voice that had finally called out to him. The next morning, Adrian found Elena in the courtyard, polishing the tiled floor with quiet devotion. She looked up at him, startled by his presence, and immediately stood. "Señor Velasquez." But Adrian raised a hand to stop her. For once, his voice carried no command, no authority, only gratitude. "You gave me back my daughter," he said, his words unsteady but true. "You gave me a gift I could never buy. For that, I owe you more than I can ever repay." Elena lowered her eyes, shaking her head gently. "You owe me nothing, señor." Isla did this. She found her voice because she finally believed someone would listen. Adrian stepped closer, his usually guarded expression softened. "And it was you who made her believe. Elena, you have changed everything." For a moment, silence stretched between them, but it was no longer empty. It was a silence full of unspoken promises, of lives forever bound by the miracle of one child's whisper. From behind them came the sound of little footsteps. Isla toddled forward in her red dress, clutching the wooden bird in her hands. She looked up at her father, then at Elena, her eyes sparkling. And then, with a voice trembling but clear, she whispered, "Family." Adrian's breath caught. Elena's eyes filled with tears. The word was small, fragile, imperfect, but it was everything. In that moment, the millionaire father no longer hid his tears. He let them fall freely, kneeling down to embrace his daughter and the woman who had given her voice. For the first time, the mansion was not just a house of marble and wealth, it was a home. And in that home, a new story began.